Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So as usual, announcements first. If you're looking for personality themed merch, such as the t-shirts and hoodies that you can wear to showcase your personality, then definitely check out the link below and also check out my Patreon for more exclusive content. So today I want to briefly touch on an initiative that I have enrolled myself in during this COVID-19 situation. You can choose to buy coffee for the frontline workers to show your support. And if you want to do that, the link is also both in the description below and in the comment section. Feel free to show them support during this tough time. So today let's get into the video topic on my thoughts on the ESTJ personality. So ironically, the ESTJ is supposed to be a personality that I myself as an INFJ have nothing in common with. Like I don't have any cognitive functions in common with the ESTJ, and we are actually known as the conflictors in socionics, which means that we tend to attack each other's weaknesses, and we basically are one of the toughest pairs to get along with. However, I don't know if this is like some kind of fate or whatever. Two of my closest family members are actually ESTJs. So my grandfather and my mom are both ESTJs, and I also encountered a lot of ESTJs while working part-time in this like cafes, restaurants, and shops. So I do realize that a lot of this like small business and or medium business owners or bosses tend to be ESTJs, and I guess this does speak to their personality types' favorite job positions. So I think that throughout the years I have gained quite a lot of understanding of the ESTJ personality, and I would definitely be as objective as I can. I would not be only bashing them or obviously only like talking about positive things about them. It will be a balance of both, and I will be sharing my honest observations. I would be starting with the more negative, or at least things that I find to be a little bit in conflict with my personality, to things that I do respect about the ESTJs, so that we can end on a wholesome note. So definitely ESTJs are one of the toughest personalities for me to talk about because of the lack of commonality, at least in terms of our values and beliefs. So I noticed that ESTJs, especially when they don't develop their extroverted intuition, when they are mainly operating on extroverted thinking being the first function and introverted sensing as their second function, they tend to be the ones that I probably would clash the most in terms of my values and beliefs. Because one thing that I notice is that ESTJs, without the development of their later two functions, they tend to be a little bit overly pragmatic in all matters. And this is also a trend that I observe in the older ESTJs. I'm not sure if this is also like maybe a cultural thing back in their days. They tend to be like overly practical to the point where even when it comes to matters like relationships, matters like finding a lifetime job, they tend to only look at the practical side of things. And so for an older ESTJ, for example, I have known like several of them who get into marriages only because of the stable income or of like a certain trustworthiness that they are looking for, and they don't seem to think about any other traits, like specific traits that they want in a partner beyond the usual generic traits of like stability and reliability. To me, that is a huge problem because when I listen to their advice about finding a partner, it just doesn't really gel well with what I emphasize on, because I obviously as an INFJ I care about emotional connection and like having a certain compatibility, which to them sounds like a little too much of a criteria, because I think for the more practical ESTJs, they feel like if you care too much about this other criteria, you may never get to find a partner. And for me, it's like I cannot really just get into a marriage for the sake of getting into marriage. Like I cannot do that when I reach a certain age. it just doesn't happen. I think I just find it really tough to subscribe to this really practical ideology that basically you have to find a partner by a certain age because society tells you to do, or because it is a practical thing. Like, to me, definitely there is a lot more to life than practicality. Like, that is not my priority, especially when it comes to relationships. And also, I think in the area of finding a job, like, I do understand where STJs in general come from, but again, like, the type of priority that they have tend to be a little different from my priority. But at the same time, I do realize that I do need a bit of stability in my life. And so there is this, like, area where we could potentially be a little balanced out. But for the older ESTJs, I find it more difficult to balance it out because they tend to be a little more extreme in the area of, like, job search and marriage. Like, they only care about the practical aspects, and they completely can neglect the emotional aspect, which is something that I obviously take into account. Like, I care about being passionate, I care about living for a purpose and all of that. And again, I'm not sure if that is for all ESTJs. Maybe there are some ESTJs who care about meaning and emotional connection later in life, or maybe it is speaking to an older crowd that they can totally neglect that in favor of stability. But for me, I am not able to do that, and I actually find it concerning if someone that I'm talking to is unable to be concerned about passion, because this is like an extroverted sensing function that INFJs maybe have to take some time to develop. But once I have developed my extroverted sensing function, I do realize that it is very important to live life to the fullest. And to me, living life to the fullest has to concern more of the emotional and also the more holistic aspect of life. Like, I cannot just look at things from a practical perspective. I just find that to be very draining for me if someone is constantly telling me that, you can only go down this way because it is the pragmatic way. Like, I have a lot more concerns, if that makes sense. And also, something that I notice about ESTJs that is very interesting, I think some ESTJs do have sympathies for, like, more dictatorial regimes, and maybe it is because some of them are okay, like, operating under this control of others. Like, they think that it is okay for one person's decision or a group of people's decisions to prevail. And that, if it is taken to an extreme, then obviously I'm not able to, like, agree with. However, I do tend to notice that there is an interesting phenomenon of ENFPs and INFPs. Like, they can really be very opposed to authoritarian regimes, but as they start to develop their extroverted thinking and introverted sensing function, sometimes they also act in that way without realizing. Because what we have to notice is that we do have all the functions, and same thing when INFJs want to be considerate, but they do have a very, I would say, very straightforward and even inconsiderate side to them because of the STP, like, other side. So going back to the ESTJs, so I'm going to move on to a little bit of a more positive observation of them. I think ESTJs, they do get misunderstood a lot because they, like I said, they seem controlling and they are pretty intimidating. And sometimes I do think that they should balance that out, because obviously just going your own way and making sure that all the decisions are, like, 100% your own is not really the best way to operate, because you can really drive away people that way. However, I do know that they have a very high standard of work ethic that I personally do respect, because I think that ESTJs are very serious about the work that they do. And they are also very serious about the work that other people do, and that's why they have this like tendency to want to control. It is up to the degree, like if someone has to micromanage somebody, it depends on how much they do it. Like a little bit of too much is not good for anybody. That is my opinion. But I think the high standards that the ESTJ hold themselves up to is to a certain degree admirable, because they really do make sure that they take pride in their work, and they also make sure that people who work for them are competent, are able to get the work done. And to me, that is very important, because obviously, again, with people like me, or people who are weak in TE in general, we don't realize sometimes that we can actually have a lot of negative consequences once we don't get something done in the right way. So even if you're well-intentioned, even if you're very like sensitive and empathetic, if you screw up in a huge way, and it is in a line of work that requires a lot of accuracy, then obviously things are going to crumble, and you can actually lead to really huge destructive impact on whatever work that you're doing, especially if, for example, you are handling money, you're handling like your client's money, or you are doing something that is related to maybe the construction sites. Like obviously you don't want to make a small mistake that leads to a very horrible outcome. So obviously I do think that the ESTJ personality is important in these areas where details are concerned and where a form of discipline is concerned. And I think that's why I also do see ESTJs as being very important in roles like the military, because you do need discipline in those areas. Like there are certain areas where structure is necessary, and even though it seems a little tough and not very suitable for my own personality, because I do value freedom. I mean, INFJs have the same functions as the ESTP, and even though we don't look alike, we do share some of the similar values, like we value freedom a lot. And obviously I don't think I can survive under militant training, but I do think that there are areas in life where this kind of STJ style of discipline is actually not only necessary but also really crucial for success. You maintaining a certain discipline in your own life, maintaining a healthy lifestyle, or when it comes to working on your own projects, having this kind of discipline and high standards for yourself is actually really important in order for you to be able to accomplish something. So this is something that I think that I need to work on more, even though I don't really have the same functions, but I do see how this can be useful in these situations. Another thing that I notice is that even though ESTJs tend to be pretty harsh on their students, sometimes there are moments where I can actually feel like I understand where they're coming from, and even though I may not agree with 100% with what they're doing, there are certain moments where I can actually feel like I feel that they have this FI side showing. So usually they do ascribe closely to the societal idea of success and so on. I remember that I do have a Chinese dance teacher, and she used to be really, really strict towards all of us, and in a way she doesn't really show very strong favoritism because she is basically harsh to everybody. And she used to judge me a lot because I think I appear to be kind of slow to her. I was one of the slow students in her mind. However, one time I actually did really well in my exams, and I'm more of a study hard for exams type of person, and she actually gave me something as an encouragement. So she saw it as an achievement, basically, if someone is good at something. So she does recognize it, and even though it's strange for a Chinese dance teacher to care about students' test score, so she actually cares about that. And I think in her mind it is a holistic form of concern for the students, even though it might be very societal in nature, but it still shows that she cares about her students. And also because of her very strict work ethic, I actually managed to become a lot more flexible as a result of her harsh training. Sometimes when taken to the extreme, I can even be a little touched by their personality because I remember I saw this film once, and it was obviously set in an olden day. That's why the training was so harsh and so unforgiving. There's like this disciple-student relationship back in like old Peking opera, training. And the master in that film was actually so harsh to the point where some of the students actually committed suicide. And so initially I actually felt really disturbed, obviously, as a modern viewer. I'm like, how can this master be so harsh? However, towards the end, like, I actually had a form of respect for him, even though I don't agree with the amount of harshness in his training. But because towards the end, I realized how serious he was in his own craft. And even like literally on the day of his death, he was like over 90 years old. Like, he literally died while he was teaching a student how to perform this particular move in the Peking opera, where there was like a sword fight, and he was trying to teach the student how to best execute a sword fight. Literally in the midst of that move, he collapsed and died. So I guess like my respect for him is not really towards obviously the harshness of like the way that he treated his students, but more towards how serious he is about that form of art. Because I do realize that a lot of ESTJs have a form of respect towards traditional arts, which requires a lot of discipline. And even though they are sometimes overly harsh, I do realize that some of the students get to really high points at the end of the training, and they really do take pride in what they're doing, even though sometimes that can be a little twisted. Obviously not saying all ESTJs are that way, but I think that film just made me feel even more polarizing feelings towards this personality, because you can really see that they are pouring their heart and soul into what they're doing. Like, even in his last breath, the guy was like teaching someone the art form. And also ESTJs have a very self-sacrificial side towards their family. They are very responsible. They are very, very capable of huge sacrifices, which I don't think I'm even capable of. Like, sometimes the amount of sacrifice that ESTJs can make towards people they care about really stuns me, because it's like, wow. I guess it's like because they don't really have this form of concern towards everybody, the way that extroverted feeling users tend to be. So when they do care about someone, again, that introverted feeling, it's like the last function. But when they do really care about people in their close circle, they can be extremely selfless and very dutiful, especially in a family setting. Feel like they can sacrifice a lot just to, perform their family duties and perform duties for society. And so it really depends on like how they use their functions. Obviously, there are ESTJs who are healthy and they are able to use their functions for the benefit of society as a whole. And again, this is like a personality that I have a lot of conflicting emotions towards. But I would say at the end of the day, I still do find things that I appreciate about the personality. And so, as usual, if you find this video interesting, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!